Jacob's sons had an extremely successful trip to Egypt. Things went better than they could have possibly imagined. And as they were leaving Egypt, their bags were filled to the brim. It was as much as they could carry. They were in the midst of a famine. And they went to Egypt and they got more food than they paid for. They spent the day before in this Egyptian's house. They were honored guests. They ate food from his table. Their brother Simeon had been returned to them. Things were amazing. So they get up in the morning and they return home. And it's not too long after they return home that the steward of the house runs up to them with a crazy allegation. What have you done? Why have you repaid evil for good? Why did you steal his Lord's cup? Why did you take what he uses to practice divination? The implication in this is very clear. He treated you well. He gave you more than you paid for. He honored you yesterday. And yet, you stole from him. The allegation was extremely surprising to the brothers. They didn't steal anything, and they were ready to defend their honor. And so they made their defense. That this is not something that they would have done. The logic of it, right? When they went to Egypt the first time, the money was returned. And they were honest men, and so they brought the money back. Like, what kind of thief returns what he supposedly stole? We're not thieves. We brought it back. We are honest. The brothers were so confident that none of them had the cup that they put themselves in a precarious position. Whoever had the cup should die, and the rest will remain this Egyptian's servants. So immediately they took their bags off and they put them on the ground for the steward to search through. This should bring back to memory a little bit when Laban ran up to Jacob and his family and said, "Where are my household gods?" And they all took the bags off and he searched through everything. That one, there was deception, and this one, there's deception, but the roles are kind of reversed. The steward appreciated the offer, but only the one who had the cup would remain, and the rest would return home as innocent men. The brothers didn't know that the cup had been planted with Benjamin. This was a setup. The steward knew that the cup would be found. Joseph knew that the cup would be found, but he started searching. The steward started searching, and he started with Reuben. And as this is going on, there's intensity building up. Right? So think if you're watching in the movie, the music's playing and it gets very intense. But then after each bag is opened and nothing is found, there's relief and yet more tension. So this is an emotional roller coaster for these brothers. 10 bags are searched and the cup is nowhere to be found. Imagine now the tension that's there. They knew Benjamin didn't take the cup, but there's only one bag left, and they're searching. The steward is searching through it, and there's the cup, the silver cup in Benjamin's bag. The brothers immediately tore their clothes. This tearing your clothes is a way that they show deep emotional distress, even anguish. Like this tore them apart. But notice, the brothers did this together. They're united in what's going on. There's no individualism in this family. The family that was so divided, the family that was so opposed to each other, now is in unison. They're together. Remember, After they sold Joseph, they had zero remorse. Right? They took their younger brother, they threw him in a pit, and they sat down and ate lunch. And then they saw the caravan passing by, and so Judah got the great idea, why would we kill him when we can sell him and make some money? They were callous, zero remorse in this entire thing. Here, they are innocent. They did nothing, and yet it causes them great anguish and deep distress. And so all the brothers return to the city. They are not going to leave Benjamin alone. He is not going there by himself. They went together so that they could plead for this Egyptian's mercy. So they arrived at the house, and the Egyptian was still there. He knew they were coming back. He knew they were coming back soon. We know that he knew it because they planted the cup. But to the brothers' minds, he's there waiting because he has some sort of special thing going on. Remember the day before, he seated his brothers at the table in birth order, which blew their minds and it caused them fear. Because no normal person would have been able to do that. And the chances of that happening by accident are extremely slim. And so in their minds, this Egyptian had some sort of special ability. And so when they arrive in his house and he's still there, this feeds into this. They walk in the house and he's there, so they immediately bow down before him. You may think this is another fulfillment of the dream or dreams, but it's not. See, the word that was used for bowing down in Joseph's dreams that he had about his brothers bowing before him, the word there implied reverence and respect. The word here implies a desperate plea, begging for mercy. They are throwing themselves before Joseph. They are completely in his hands, and they are begging him. The Egyptian told them it was quite foolish to steal a cup from one who practices divination. Now, just a quick aside, Joseph didn't practice divination, right? The Bible is clear. Joseph was one who understood things that God gave him the ability. Remember when Pharaoh and the cupbearer and the chief baker had dreams, it was Joseph who said, God gave you those and God will give you the answer. This is not some sort of magic that Joseph practiced. But the brothers didn't know this. They thought that he was one of the Egyptian magicians. What is this that you have done? Why have you done this? How could you have taken from me? Again, to the brothers, he was not a normal person. He knew things that a normal person wouldn't know. And this Egyptian, now that they were bowing before, was quite angry with them, and he made it very clear. They had violated his trust. They took advantage of his kindness. And Judah, the solidified leader of the family, in verse 16, spoke up. What shall we say to my Lord? What shall we speak? Or how can we clear ourselves? God has found out the guilt of your servants. Behold, we are my Lord's servants, both we and he also in whose hand the cup had been found. Judah said what was obvious, but he also said what is not so obvious. See, the brothers had no defense. The cup was in Benjamin's bag. What can we say? There's nothing that we can say to convince you that we didn't take the cup. But they didn't. See, as to the guilt that Judah is referring to, he's not speaking of the cup because they didn't have guilt in taking the cup. They were guiltless in that. But they had been carrying a guilt with them for 22 years. 22 years, and now it seemed like it was the time to pay. God was getting back at them for what they did. See, Judah saw the cup incident as God's punishment to them for what they did to Joseph. Notice the word found. God has found the guilt. It's the same word that's used in found the cup. God has discovered their guilt. Not that he didn't know it happened, but that it was now brought up. It was now seen. God was punishing them for what they did to Joseph. And so Judah is confessing to this Egyptian the guilt that they had and what they did to Joseph. Notice also it says, "We are my Lord's servants, both we and he also in whose hand the cup has been found." The "we" refers to the 10 brothers, the ones who sold Joseph, the one who put him in the pit and sold him. We are your Lord's servants, but also he in whose hand the cup has been found. Yep, Benjamin would have to pay too, but he was an innocent bystander in this entire thing. Benjamin was not guilty. Everyone knew that Benjamin was not guilty. The brothers were. And so Judah says, "We are your servants because of what we did to Joseph." Benjamin's the unlucky one who just happened to be with us when this was brought to light. They had feared this day. They had been carrying the guilt of what they did to Joseph, and now it was time to pay, and unfortunately, Benjamin was with them. You ever have those times in your life where you know you did something wrong? You know you've sinned, and you fear the day that it's brought to light. You carry it around with you, just wondering, when is it going to come time? When are the consequences going to happen? This is what the brothers did. For 22 years, they carried this with them. See, the Egyptian, though, would not have this. Verse 17. But he, Joseph, said, "Far be it from me that I should do so. Only the man in whose cup was found shall be my servant. But as for you, go up in peace to your father." See, one of the struggles we have in English is you and your, is plural and singular. Hebrew doesn't have that. Here, the word you and the word your is plural. So he's talking to the other 10. As for you, as for y'all, go up to y'all's father in peace. But the one who had the silver cup, he's to remain. Here's the test. Here is the test that Joseph was setting up. What would they do? Would they leave Benjamin behind? I mean, think about what had happened before. They took Joseph because he was the favorite. Jacob loved him more, so they put him in a pit, and then they sold him. Then on their way home, they had to devise this whole idea, this whole lie of how this happened. And so they had to make up a story that wasn't true. Here, they could easily return to Egypt or to Canaan, and they could say to Jacob, we tried. We went back. We bowed before him. We begged for Benjamin to be set free, but he would not allow it. They could have returned. They could have gotten rid of Benjamin, Jacob's favorite, and they could do it with a clean conscience. What would they do? So Judah again spoke to the Egyptian. He acknowledged that he was taking a risk by speaking to this man of power. See, we don't have this in our culture, but if you spoke out of turn, if you spoke when you weren't asked to speak to this person of power, the person of power could have you killed. They were so high up, so revered, so respected that if you spoke out of turn, if you spoke when you weren't invited to speak, it was a risk of your life. So here, Judah is risking his life by speaking. And he did it anyway. This here is the longest speech recorded in Genesis. And he refers to his father 14 times. Jacob is the focus of this. So Judah replayed all the events. We went down to Egypt. These are the conversations we have. It was the Egyptian who asked about their father and brother. It was the Egyptian who demanded to see the youngest brother, even though they told him it was a risk to their father. The only reason Benjamin was in Egypt was because of this Egyptian. They were being obedient to him. And see, their father loved their youngest brother. He was the only remaining child of the boy's mother since his brother was dead. Notice something here, because every other time before it was his brother is no more. Now Judah is more forthcoming. He's dead. They believed Joseph to be dead. As far as they were concerned, they hadn't seen him in 22 years. They have no idea what happened to him, and in their mind, he's dead. Their father was an old man. This is the same term that Joseph used in 43, verse 27, when Joseph asked about their father. And so Judah is trying to play onto Joseph's sympathies. Their youngest brother was a child of his old age. And the love between their father and Benjamin was something special. Something the brothers didn't have with their father. Jacob and Benjamin's hearts were knit together. This is the same term that's used in 2 Samuel to describe David and Jonathan. This best friend idea. They were so close. This was Jacob and Benjamin. They were very close. And if Benjamin did not return, it would kill their father. In verse 24 and verse 30, Judah referred to Jacob not as our father, but my father. See, this is personal to him. This isn't our father. This is him. He shows his care and his compassion for Jacob. He's my father, and I don't want to see something happen to him. Jacob had been mourning for 22 years because of Joseph. And Judah could not imagine seeing that happen to him again. In verse 28, for the first time, Joseph learned the cause of his death. He was torn apart by wild animals. Imagine all that's going through Joseph's mind at this point as well. But if Benjamin doesn't return, Jacob would have lost Rachel and both of her sons, and it would be devastating to him. So remember, Judah and his brothers were jealous of Joseph. He had received special treatment from Jacob. He was the favorite, and they hated him for it, and so they sold him into slavery. They wanted to kill him, but they decided to make some cash. But now, their love and compassion for Jacob shined through. They had changed. Rather than ignoring the favoritism or using it as a reason to leave Benjamin in Egypt, Jacob's favoritism for Benjamin was the very thing that Judah used to plead for mercy. For Joseph, it was what caused them to hate Joseph. For Benjamin, their love for their father became so great that it was that favoritism that caused them to have compassion and love for their father. What an amazing change. This passage ends in a way that nobody who knew Judah earlier in his life would have expected. Yes, Judah was a pledge for Benjamin's safety. If Benjamin didn't return, Judah would bear the guilt for the rest of his life. but he was already bearing the guilt of Joseph. How could he now carry the guilt of Benjamin as well? And so we see in verse 33 and 34, "Now therefore, please let your servant remain instead of the boy as a servant to my Lord, and let the boy go back to his brothers. For how can I go back to my father if the boy is not with me? I fear to see the evil that would find my brother." Notice what Judah is clinging to. Judah is not saying, "Listen, I took the surety, just take me instead because I promised it." He is clinging to his love and compassion for his father. He could not bear the thought of returning home without Benjamin because of what it would do to Jacob. Yes, Judah was a surety, but when we look at the reasoning, we see the compassion and love that Judah had for his father, and in his mind that was worse than anything else. He did not want to see his father suffer anymore. Now, when we started in Genesis, we said that there are many glimpses of the 315 Redeemer in this book. Remember, the 315 Redeemer is the promise that God made to Adam and Eve when he cursed the serpent in Genesis 3:15, that the seed of the woman would crush the serpent's head. And we said that we will see glimpses of this throughout. And as time gets closer to Jesus, in the Old Testament, we see more and more aspects of this Redeemer revealed. But we've seen many of these already in Genesis. Right? He would be a descendant of Adam and Eve through Seth, and then Noah, and then Shem, and then Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. In the flood and the ark, we saw that God will judge sin, but he will provide a way of salvation. His way, one way. In Noah's blessings of his sons, we saw that he, the Messiah, the 315 Redeemer, would be a Shemite, a Semite, somebody from that ethnicity, but that the descendants of Japheth, who became Europeans, mostly, would dwell in those tents. And so he would be a Shemite. He would be a Middle Eastern, which we know he became of the tribe of Abraham. So we see these. In the promise to Abraham, we saw that he would be a blessing to all nations. He would be a descendant of Abraham, but he would be for all nations. In Abraham, we saw that God condescends himself, and he takes on human form, which is a precursor to the actual incarnation, when he didn't just take the form of a man, he became a man. In Melchizedek, we saw that he is a priest and a king, something that the Levitical law did not permit. In Sodom and Gomorrah, we saw that he will not judge the righteous with the unrighteous, but will bring the righteous out of judgment. When Abraham was told to sacrifice Isaac, we saw that God would provide a sacrifice. The just death of Isaac was stopped because the Lord will provide a lamb. In Jacob's dream at Bethel, we saw that heaven comes to earth. God is not unreachable, but he had to provide a way. Babel taught us that man cannot reach heaven in our own way. Something we see in the patriarchs is that he even uses the sins of his people to accomplish redemption. See, the brothers sold Joseph into slavery. It was their sin that God used to save his people from the famine, something that Joseph will later explain. A couple weeks ago, we looked at many of the different ways that Joseph points to the Redeemer, so we're not going to go through that again. But the point has been made. From Genesis 3:15 until now, we have seen the shadow of the Redeemer become much more clear. But today we see something else. Judah offered himself as a substitute to take Benjamin's punishment upon himself. Judah, who we later discover is in the lineage of the 315 Redeemer, offered to be a substitute. He offered to take his brother's punishment upon himself. And this would allow his brothers to go free. The transformation of Judah and the covenant family is incredible. God brought their sins before their eyes, and he forced them to acknowledge it and repent of it. What an amazing God we serve. He doesn't leave us in our sin. He brings it before our eyes so that we understand who we are before him, and he brings us to a place of repentance. But it's even more amazing than that, because he doesn't just leave us there. He doesn't say, all right, there's your sin, now deal with it. No, instead, he stands in our place and takes the punishment that we deserve upon himself. Judgment from God for our sin is paid for by himself, by God. Jesus the Christ became human being and stood in our place. And the punishment that brought us peace was upon him, and by his wounds we are healed. Praise be to God.